Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Quick Metal Mixing Tips, where we're going to be looking at adding realism to MIDI drums. Now, when I listen to program drums these days, the actual programs themselves are superb. They really do allow a producer or mixer to really get some realistic drum sounds out of them, but you do have to put the effort into the automation and programming to get the best results, and too often I hear things that just sound very robotic. So couple of simple things you can do, really easy tricks just to add that bit more realism to the sounds. First, a couple of things you shouldn't be doing though. Now, I use Superior Drummer, so I'm going to open this up as an example, but whatever one you use, you should probably find it has a humanize or humanizer section. Superior Drummer down here on the right. Now, thank God their guys at Toontrack have realised that humanising in its traditional sense just doesn't work. What a lot of MIDI drum VST programs will do is slightly offset the timing a bit, just to make it sound like it's a human making ever so slight timing errors, and all it does is make it sound like you've got a bad drummer. So in Superior Drummer, you can make it choose different things like alternate hands or random samples, and that's pretty good. But if you have options in yours that means that it goes out of time slightly, do not use them because it will sound rubbish. So there's one don't for you there. Definitely stay away from that. The other thing you need to bear in mind with metal in particular, bring up some MIDI here. I've got kicks and snares. You'll see here I've got kick L, kick R, snare and snare alternate. Now, if your VST gives you the option of more than one instrument or foot or hand for the same drum, then always take it, because that will sound much more realistic than just trying to use one foot, one hand. The traditional or old school drum VSTs, which used one sample for a kick and one sample for a snare, they sounded very robotic and machine-like, and the more variation we can add in, the better. VSTs nowadays will take a random sample of a snare. I think with Superior Drummer they've got maybe 15 different snares. It will pick a random one for each hit, and then there'll be 15 different ones for this as well, so there's 30 different snares it's going to pick. You also, with metal, don't ever want to alter the velocity really of the kicks and the snares. People will say that to humanize the sound you may want to alter the volume somewhat. We're going to come onto that with other instruments in a drum kit, but kick and snare, this is metal, they need to be full power all the time. The only time you'd want to maybe not do that is on the snare, like here where I've got a really fast snare roll going on. I may want to have that crescendoing, so that when that plays it sounds quite realistic. I'll just get that playing for you now. Okay, that sounds pretty damn good actually. That's the only time you're going to want to do that. Don't ever think that you need to slightly adjust the volume of your kicks, because that just isn't necessary anymore. Moving on to cymbals. Hats are a big one you can do things with here to make your drum kit sound more realistic. One thing you don't want to do, which I've seen in other tutorials, if we highlight all my hats here, these two lines are a closed and an open hat. Up here on Cubase on the menu bar there's a Q button. Push that and it gives a quantized setup option, and it can set swing values. You can see the quarter notes here in blue. This swing bar, the more we increase that, the more offset it will make certain notes. Now, that will give you a very jazzy swing feel, which you definitely do not want in metal. If you're watching my videos, I'm sure you're probably writing metal. You'd want a 0 there at any time. Do not include that in your metal music, please. Okay, let's have a quick listen to what these hats sound like without any volume editing. Now, Superior Drummer is pretty high quality and they do randomize the samples, so that doesn't sound bad, but it will sound better if we alter the volume ourselves a bit. Just randomly like that. Now, if I'll just do this with the open ones as well. This is all well and good, but if you're doing it with a whole song, you are not going to want to spend 5 minutes going through 150 bars of drum music changing all the volume of your hats. So there's a much quicker way of doing this. What I would do is just set all of these up with 100% volume again. What you will need to do, highlight everything that you want to change, and up here in the MIDI menu, something called a logical editor. Click on that, And in the menus, under standard set 1, you will see at the bottom random velocity 60 to 100. You click on that, it loads it in the bottom half of this screen. We want to change our minimum values though to 100 and our maximum to 127, which of course is the maximum MIDI volume. Hit apply, and that has now added randomness. That's a bit too random for my liking, so I can edit it. You will find when you do that over a whole song, there will be sections which you find are a bit too extreme, so maybe tidy them up a bit or reduce your parameters. You will also want to go through and make sure certain beats are accented more than others, just for the feel of the riff you're using it with. We now have a listen to this, it should sound a lot more realistic. Okay, well, I say a lot more realistic. It is obviously very subtle, but it's all these little things that you add together when you're mixing a song that will really make it stand out and sound really good. So that's with your hats, and that also works with other cymbals. With metal, obviously, instead of hats or ride, you might be using a crash or something like that to keep the beat. You want to adjust the volume of that slightly, not too much, not as much as we've done with the hats. The closer together the hits, the greater variation in volume you want, really. Moving on to toms, this is where we can really get some good results. Now, toms are my favourite drums to edit in metal because we can really make them sound good. I've set up a really simple tom roll here. Let's have a quick listen. It sounds pretty robotic, and the reason is because although the samples are really good quality, and even though they're randomised when they're hit consecutively, as you can see some of them are, the volume is still the same, and that's what we need to change. So again, we highlight them all. Same way as with the hats, into the MIDI menu, logical editor. It's remembered the last one that I used, so that's great. We can just hit apply here and close this, and you'll see that's randomized it again quite a lot. Again, you would want to accent certain tom hits to make the roll fit in with your riff, but let's give this another listen. That sounds a lot better. As I say, I would spend some more time editing particular accents and that to really make it sound realistic and fit in with whatever guitars we're doing. One more thing you can do with the toms though, a really good one, this. When you've got a different type of tom activity, when they're doing more of an accent of their own, I'll give you an example here. This is another quick tom riff I've written to demonstrate. That is, again, another standard type of tom riff you would use. It sounds okay, but there's one thing we can do to make it sound better, more realistic and more powerful. What you see I've done is I've doubled up on the toms here in each hit, and I make sure I've turned off my quantization snapping to the grid, and I'm going to slightly offset one of the two notes on each occasion. Just by a small amount. This replicates the drummer using both sticks on the same drum skin, but being slightly out of time, but in a good way. Let's hear now how this sounds. Make sure that that's going to loop properly. It actually gives more power to the toms because we're playing two full volume toms slightly offset to each other, so it really helps that power through, and that makes quite a big difference. So that's all it is for this episode. Nice, quick and easy, which makes a nice change for some of mine, but they're easy things to do. They will make a big difference to your drum sounding more human. The final thing I would say, which I hear occasionally and really annoys me, is remember that a drummer only has 2 hands and 2 feet. They can only do so much at any one time. So if you're a drummer, I'm sure you know very well how to program drums, but if you're a guitarist or a bass player or a singer, try and think about how a drummer plays and make sure they're not hitting 3 or 4 things with their hands at the same time, because it won't sound realistic. The more you can keep things to reality, the more they will sound realistic, because your brain and your ear will know. Keep an eye out soon for some more videos. I've just recently posted up my first programming using East West's Quantum Leap Symphonic Orchestra. I know a lot of metalers may not necessarily be using that kind of thing, but any of you are interested in me doing some tutorials on Quantum Leap, because it's a pretty complicated piece of software, let me know maybe in the comments or send me a message, and I might do a series on those, because it's really big, that one. It's there's a lot to learn. So looking forward to Cubase 7 coming out as well next month. I will be purchasing that in early 2013, so keep an eye out for some Cubase 7 tutorials as well coming up, with some really good new features it's got coming out there, so looking forward to it. Thank you.